Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, come on, come on, come on, demons.
Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and cast your minds back to the glory days after our drought-breaking flag in 2021. I used to kick off every episode beaming, what a time to be alive as a Demons fan. Well, fast forward to now, and the mood has well and truly shifted. Since that magical unbeaten run of 17 games, we've won just 33 of our last 67 matches. We've bowed out of 4 finals, and we're currently languishing in second last position on the ladder with 5 straight losses to open this season. Right now, it's anything but a great time to be a Demons fan. And joining me tonight to dissect another loss, this time at the hands of the Bombers, is George. Good evening, George.
Is it all that good evening at all? But anyhow, good evening, Andy. Good evening to Bin Man. Good evening to our very faithful listeners. I've got to admire you for tuning in again this week. You know, it was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, a psychologist, I think, had spoke about the 5 stages of grief. I think I'm past the denial stage about this football club. And like a lot of Demonlanders, I've moved to the angry phase. So let's see what comes out tonight.
I thought you were talking about the 12 stages, 12-step program of addiction, because I've got to wean myself off this footy club. Also joining us tonight, let's see how broken he is. Good evening, Big Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonlanders. Not broken. Following the D's for a long time is character building, and I'm quite the character. So I thought, George, you were going to reference Maslow's hierarchy of needs there, the psychological theory suggesting human needs are arranged in hierarchical order. Well, one of my hierarchical orders is a decent bloody football team, and a team that goes out and plays with the sort of spirit that fans like us bring to our support for the footy club week in, week out, season in, season out, decade after decade. It's just, I can't begin to tell you how frustrated I am, Andy. One of my elite skill sets is being able to pretend things didn't happen or aren't about to happen. And so I've pretty much switched off all football after I forced myself to watch about 25 minutes of David King and et al. Wrapping up the game, and a bit of self-flagellation there, and then watched Mission Impossible, the latest Tom Cruise film. So, and since then I've done nothing. I've stayed away from Melbourne Footy Club, though I have watched the other games, and had the day off today. Had a magnificent day watching sport, and have denied it all up until about 2 hours ago when I realised we've got a podcast coming up about the game.
This is a really sad situation, isn't it? Bin Man's listening to 20 minutes of David King.
Well, I mean, geez, all of the talk about the media being stuck into us, I mean, God, we've got nothing really to argue with at the moment, have we? And
thoroughly deserved.
George, you predicted it last week. You mentioned all we need now is a letter from the president. Well, it stopped a little short. I think we've got it coming up later, so I won't cut your lunch there, Andy. I did read the run sheet, but it all but gave Goody the seal of approval, the reverse death doom. But it was just such a frustrating performance, wasn't it? And of course we'll get into it, but shattered doesn't fully capture it.
It absolutely is shattering. Well, let's get into some housekeeping before we get on with the show. And each week I invite our loyal listeners to support the podcast by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate your feedback, and as a token of gratitude, we do give you a well-deserved shout-out on the show for those who do take the time to share their reviews. And Balagan Party writes, the Demonland podcast is everything I want as a D's fan. Passionate, honest, and never afraid to call it how it is. Andy, B-Man and George bring thoughtful discussion without the fluff you get in the footy media. The fan questions keep it grounded and give voice to what we're all thinking. It's like unpacking the game with a group of mates who actually know their footy. Essential listening every week. Well, thanks for that, Balagan Party. Hopefully you enjoying what we're going to unpack tonight. It might not be so joyous. Keep that feedback coming. Simply leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we do give that shout out on the show like we just did. If you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, you want to leave feedback, ask a question, or share a comment for the show, you can do that under our weekly podcast post. Just slide into our DMs, and don't worry, we won't read out your full name on the air. You can download and listen to the Demonland podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, or any of your favourite podcasting apps. And in addition, you can also watch and listen to us on YouTube. Just search for Demonland Podcast to find our channel. And don't forget to subscribe. If you want to connect with other passionate D's fans, go on and check out our Demonland forum at demonland.com, and you can sign up and join in the conversation with fellow D's supporters around Australia and around the world. It's free, and you can post questions and comments for the show like we've got coming up. We've got lots of them tonight. And if you want to jump on the air and have your say on any of the topics that we're covering, give us a call. Going back to our new number because I deleted my eSIM and I need a new QR code to put it back on. So I'm going to ring Telstra tomorrow. That'll be fun. 0390163666, 0390163666. Get on that number while it's still available. I'll answer. I'll put you on mute and bring you in when there's a break in the conversation. You can also call that number anytime during the week and leave a message, and we'll play it on the show. Got a couple tonight. Our chat room is back. So if you want to listen live, join us in the chat room, demonland.com/podcast, and be a part of the discussion in real time. And as always, we go live every Monday night at 8 p.m. So if you want to catch the show as it happens, head on over to demonland.com and tune in at 8 p.m. on a Monday night. Let's get into match overview. The Demons suffered a significant 39-point defeat to the Bombers at Adelaide Oval during the gather round, marking their worst start to the season since 2012. I think each week we lose, it's marking the worst start since 2012. It's a popular year for bad starts. We had a 0-5 record at that time too. The D's were somewhat competitive early, trailing by just 6 points early in the second quarter. However, Essendon seized control with a 5-goal run, establishing a 35-point lead into the third term, and Melbourne responded with a spirited 4-goal burst, narrowing the margin to 10 points late in that quarter. Despite this effort, the Bombers dominated the final term, outscoring the Demons 5-1, culminating in their 39-point victory. And Melbourne's forward efficiency was notably poor. Despite leading the inside 50 count 51-43, they managed only 8 goals, converting at a rate of 11.68%. In contrast, Essendon capitalised on their opportunities, highlighting the Demons' issues with forward structure and execution. Captain Max Gawn delivered a commendable performance in the ruck, especially after Essendon's Nick Bryan exited early due to injury. And Melbourne edged out Essendon in clearances but failed to translate this advantage into scoreboard pressure. And Bailey Fritsch showed glimpses of form with a goal that ended a streak of 7 consecutive behinds. And Kasai Pickett also contributed with a goal, marking his first for the season. Post-match, Coach Simon Goodwin acknowledged the team's challenging position, expressing confidence in his ability to lead the club through adversity. However, the fan base's patience appears to be wearing thin. On Demonland, supporters voiced frustration over the team's performance and questioned coaching decisions, particularly regarding player selections and forward-line strategies. With the Demons now sitting 17th on the ladder, only above West Coast, the pressure is mounting to secure their first win of the season. The upcoming match against Freo at the MCG presents an opportunity to reverse their fortunes and regain confidence. But this Demon fan is anything but confident. My memories of Alice Springs last year are all too fresh. Want to get into your stats, Swalesby, man?
Well, as I said, I haven't. I only really started thinking about this game. The Mission Impossible film, by the way, was quite entertaining in a in a fashion of completely ignoring reality. So I highly recommend it, as was commendable performance from McIlroy today in the golf. So I haven't turned my mind at all to this game, and I did actually yesterday start thinking about the stats file, and of course I read all the stats. Thanks, Wheelo. I really look forward to Wheelo posting the stats from each game, and increasingly find it a little bit hard to sort of think, it really helps me understand the game. But stats are really only, useful in so far as, when you're playing well and you're playing reasonable. When you're playing as poorly as we did on the weekend, they're really next to useless in some regards. I was just, when I was thinking about the stats files, I just couldn't sort of think about anything but ugly stats, and so that's all I'm going to focus in on is ugly stats. It was a woeful performance. Any game plan that you bring to the table, your number one thing. So, well, first of all, before I jump in, I will have quickly talk about the player ratings. Top 5, Maxi Gawn, 19.3. 20 is an elite game of footy. Again, he was terrific in his effort and application. He was aided by, what's the name of the Essendon player who went down?
Brian.
Nick Bryan.
And you can't knock his effort. He was phenomenal. And in our worst quarter, just about was second quarter was his best quarter. Their centre clearances, I won't even go into the numbers on this one, but you would have seen it, 12 centre clearances for 1 point, I think we scored from centre clearances. So he was giving us first use. We just couldn't do anything with his dominance, I guess. And it really speaks to I know there's a question later on about, are we relying too much on Max? What can you do when a fella plays that level of footy? Next in line was Langers. Langdon, I thought, was brilliant. His running all game was just awesome, and he can hold his head high. I was a little bit surprised at this. Cozzy Pickett, I guess he was our third greatest player. I thought he was good, but again, his body language left a little bit to be desired, in my opinion. Salo had his best game, I thought, for a long time, and so I was pleased to see that was reflected in the player ratings. He had 13.8 for our forced hired rating player. Another player who's having a really good season, I reckon, and he can hold his head high, is Jake Bowie. I thought his effort for the entire game was really impressive. And again, the player rating stats are only one measure of a player's performance. Obviously, I think it's a good one in the sense of it's consistent and there's a set criteria, so it's less subjective. This one surprised me a little bit when I thought about it, was Clayton Oliver. He was our sixth best player with 11.8 player rating points. But I was really, really, really disappointed in Clary, and maybe we'll get into that during the match. But his body language for a senior player was unacceptable, and his lack of run to cover opponents or provide outlets or defensive spread was laughable. He had his best quarter in the last quarter, which was interesting, but the game was dead by then. He tackled hard, he applied a fair bit of pressure, but his defensive running was just unacceptable. Right down the bottom, a player who's struggling a little bit and is flying under the radar a bit given all else that's going on, is Jack Henderson. He was our lowest rated player. But another player who's struggling a bit, I reckon, as well, and was, showed that going back isn't, it's not as easy as often people suggest, that halfback flank's the easiest position to play or the best position to play because you see the whole ground in front of you, was Caleb Windsor. I thought he had a bit of a mare and was outpointed a couple of times, and that was reflected in the scoring. And Tom McDonald was our third lowest. Stevie May was our fourth lowest, and maybe that's a bit tough on May. I didn't think Tom McDonald had a good game, and he's not good one-on-one, and so we really, really missed Lever. Just to highlight, I thought Harry Sharp was pretty good. He had 5.7 of which was in the third quarter, and Van Ruin had another quiet game, and he's got something rattling around his head. He's just completely out of sorts, and we'll talk about selection. But to sort of cut to the chase a little bit on that, I was really surprised he was selected this week and Turner was dropped, and I think that was a flat-out mistake. So mainly, as I said, it was ugly.
Before you get into the ugly stuff, because we don't have any talk about individual players, but you brought up Windsor. So do you think we should be playing him off half-back? Should we persist with this or move him back to a wing?
Well, I mean, it goes to a question that we'll get to maybe either a little bit this week or as it goes forward. And that's, we'll talk also about Brad Green's message, right? And, I have to say one of my most strident and consistent criticisms of the Melbourne Football Club for a long time, and I reckon since Peter Jackson left the footy club, is our communication. Our communication is woeful. It is just woeful. And there's an issue that if you can get, that I wouldn't mind raising, that I haven't read Demon Land because I've been in such a funk from after that match that it's only going to make me more furious. But I don't know if you did you watch the replay? The game on Fox? Did you watch Fox or Seven?
I can't remember.
I was on KO.
That was on. KO. It wasn't on 7.
Did you see the wrap up after? So I watched for about half an hour afterwards, and I was almost, as I say, it was like a form of self-flagellation. I was like, "Yeah, bring it on," like David King and Jay Clark, who I actually don't mind. He is on the Fox coverage now, and he was talking at length. He was talking about the supposed meeting between the footy club and Track's parents. And there was a little bit of reporting about it. And look, this is a side issue, but it goes back to my complaint about Melbourne's comms. And so I don't know if there was something pushback about this today because I haven't seen anything. Maybe you can let me know if you've seen some. But essentially what Jay Clark said was that Melbourne Footy Club met with his parents for the first time. Now, I'd read that on Demon Land or some reference to it and had assumed, and I think correctly, that they'd spoken before, but this was the first time they'd had a sit down. And there was reporting on it that not only had they had a sit down, but that they were happy with the outcome of it, and everyone the club reiterated that they wanted Track to stay and Track was happy. That was what I'd read was a summary of the meeting. And I took from that of course they had conversations with Track's parents, but this was the first time they'd sat down and maybe aired some of it face to face. And anyway, Jake Clark raised all of that, but left it open as if, it didn't explain it in the way I just did. And Jack Riewoldt jumped all over it and was furious, was saying, no wonder they're, paraphrasing, no wonder there's, for all the talk of love, blah, 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 they're a disconnected football team. No wonder they're a disconnected footy team when a guy almost dies on the field and you don't speak to their parents for 6 months. It's a complete and utter lie. And I was so unbelievably angry. It was like, and Jack Riewoldt went on about it for about 4 or 5 minutes, and Jay Clark didn't push back at all, didn't clarify it. He even at one point, Jack Riewoldt said, so what? They didn't speak to him at any stage. And Jay Clark was silent. He knows that that's not the case. Now, I know it's a side thing. It's got nothing to do with our performance, but I fully expected and hoped the club would come out and whack both of them super hard and Fox, because that is defamatory. And I was absolutely ropeable. Obviously, on the back of our performance, my mood wasn't great, but they're just absolutely not on. And Jack Riewoldt has got a thing against Melbourne, and he has for a long time. And that just like for another bonehead footballer coming into the media and having a bloody voice and then running our club down, I was so furious. And all of them, surely there's a producer talking to these whackers in the ear saying, no, clarify. They've spoken to him. Multiple times we spoke to his parents. And it was just, I just think it was appalling. So that's a long way from Caleb Windsor. So
Caleb Windsor on the wing. Got it.
Caleb Windsor on the wing. It goes to the question of, are we at the comms? Are we in a rebuild? Are we dedicated to playing this style of game? If we are, then we've got to stay the course. Like, you can't decide we're going to go to a new game plan, which is what Green references in that bit of communication. That's what he referenced before, and that's what infuriates me about our comms, is that if that's what the football department, the CEO or the interim CEO, the president, the coach, if that's what they want fans to sign up for, a new method, well, that's what we've got to play, and we've got to hold our nerve and play Caleb Windsor at halfback flank. He's there for not blink 4 losses, and it feels like we're blinking already all over the place. I mean, we don't have effort. We're not bringing effort to the table. But nonetheless, if you're committed to a particular method and a game plan, a key part of that is you need run from the halfback flank. I mean, I don't know if you boys watch much football on the weekend. I watched Port on the weekend, and I had a big go at Port. I was super confident Port would win that game because I knew they would come out firing, and I knew that they would press up hard on the Hawks and create pressure on the ball carrier. And that's exactly what they did. And they played Butters off the halfback flank, who's quick, dynamic, everything that we want Windsor to be in that position. So it goes to what we want. The club is saying to the fans, well, we're going to play this way. We're going to stick with us. We're going to play the method. Well, what I expect them to do is explain what method we're going to play. And if you want our support that he's asking for in that missive, well, then explain what we're going to do. And then let's see the evidence on the weekend.
You can't explain what you're going to do because you can't give away your game plan.
Well, you can in generalities. We're going to
we can because it's not going to
halfback flank. That's why Windsor's playing at the halfback flank. I mean, that's what the So I think we've got to. He didn't look defensively strong, and he hasn't. But yes, if that's the method, I would be playing him at halfback flank.
You've got to give Windsor some free rope. I mean, he's got all sorts of supposedly senior and experienced players around him who are underperforming by any measure whatsoever. But this is a guy in his second year who spent half of last season on the out injured and has only just come back. So, the fact that he doesn't produce in one game, there's an awful lot of other players in that game who are just simply well below standard for what they're expected to do.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't want to knock Windsor, but to the question of playing at halfback flank, if we're committed to that method, then stick to your guns and play him at halfback flank. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We've got plenty of other selections that we'll talk about during the match that I wouldn't have.
And the other thing is, who in the hell would we bring in lieu of him?
Well, we kept on the question of playing him up on the wing, exactly. But who goes back to halfback flank, particularly with no McVie?
Yeah. So, Judd McVie might be back in the next week or two, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, is he going to come straight back in? He's had 3 months off legs almost. That's been a pretty serious injury.
Yeah.
The only good data. So before I get into
your ugly, sorry about that.
To the ugly is we did better on intercept marks. So we had 17 intercept marks to their 10, which is excellent. It was our season high. Tackles wasn't too bad. We're only down 3, so our tackling effort was better. This was really terrific. This was a good number. This is probably the only real positive number for me in the whole match is tackles inside 50. We laid 14 tackles inside 50 to their 4, so we're plus 10 for tackles inside 50, and that's what we've been calling for the last 2-3 weeks. I don't know how many of those tackles were effective because we still couldn't trap the ball inside. So the ugly.
I wonder. There's a question later. Someone talks about effort and tackling, and up at half time there were 9 players that hadn't had a tackle. 10 if you include the sub. There wasn't on, but we won't include him. So I wonder how many of those tackles you just talked about were in the second half after they might have got a bit of a spray. Hopefully,
or in that third quarter when we noticeably. I'll get to that in a second. So, stats, talk about, they're useful as a way of helping understand things, but they're symptoms, not cause stats. The 2 stats I just wanted to highlight were one's is a symptom of the other in a way, and the second one is a symptom and also a cause to a degree, if that makes sense. So, uncontested possessions, there was a lot of talk about this. They had 297 to 218, so what's that, 79 more uncontested possessions. And there was a heap of conversation about that in the call during the match, as I said, in that, and also in the 20 minutes or so I watched post-match. And what that tells me is that the teams are deliberately going in. So I'm not sure if you saw any of the post-match wash-up. Draper was interviewed about, maybe I watched for about 45 minutes after. They interviewed Sammy Draper, and it was embarrassing. It was totally embarrassing for the Melbourne Football Club. He was asked about the uncontested possessions. Why so many? This is the week after Geelong had the most uncontested possessions in God knows how long. Was it Geelong? When did we play Geelong? He said that he knew coming in they knew coming into the game that we've got to get him on the outside and spread him. And that's on the back of De Koning saying exactly the same thing against Geelong. We know when we play Melbourne, you've got to get it on the outside and make them run around. And I can't recall, there was a match last year, was it Freo or one of the other games we played, where one of the players said exactly the same thing. You know, against Melbourne, if the way to do it is to spread them, to run them around. And that's what they did in the first quarter. And why it's embarrassing is because it highlights all our problems in one thing. So it's a symptom. 290, to allow that is, particularly after what Geelong did to us, comes down to this number. So our pressure rating in that first quarter was 150. Theirs was 180, a differential of 30. That is not even anywhere close to AFL standard, and it's at the heart of why I'm so furious. It was, you know, the passion that we bring to the club as supporters, the passion that Brad Green tries to leverage in that letter that he sent out today. Well, that's what I expected to see in this match. That's what I fully expected to see. I hope to see it at least, perhaps. And it just was not there. One of the things about the pressure stats is corralling and pressing up is counted as a pressure. So why I say those two, the first one, the uncontested possessions, is a symptom to a degree of the second, is that when you're pressing up the way Port did to Hawthorn, take away their space. They kept on pressing right up onto them so that they couldn't move the ball. You know, they chipping it around. Hawthorn chipped it around. There was a Port guy right up in his grill. That's what all clubs, when they're playing their best footy, that's half of the pressure. When you don't do that, when you drop off them, when you let them have all of those uncontested possessions, that's when you get this naturally low pressure number. But 150 is just unbelievable. In their peak in 23 when they won the flag, sometimes the Pies would win games where they had a differential in the pressure rating. They were the only club to do it, and that was because of their method of spreading it. So the more you spread it, the less contests there are, so obviously less pressure is. To come out in a must-win game, 4 down, the club in some state of shock against an old rival like the Bombers, to come out and only have a pressure rating of 150 in the first quarter to their 180 was unacceptable. And I cannot believe halfway through that second quarter, I was as close to stopping watching a game of footy as I can recall just about ever. I was so furious at our effort. Our effort was so painful, but our pressure was non-existent. We were not running to cover people. We were not getting up in their grill. We were letting them. We weren't pressing up at all. It was just appalling. That third quarter, I show the differential. So I cannot believe Brad Green referenced that third quarter, and I know we're going to talk about it, Andy, in that letter, because that third quarter made it all worse. Like for 10, 15 minutes, we played good, reasonable footy. That was because our pressure rating in that quarter, our pressure rating was 186. And I'll bet you any money it was 186 or 200 to about the 20-minute mark, and then it fell away to their 183. It was the only quarter that we had more pressure than 186 to 183. And it was the only quarter where we looked like an AFL football team that had some sort of ability to play, not even the sort of way the footy's being played, but just a generally accepted pressure level. Doesn't matter what method is playing. I don't think you need to play, we'll touch on it a bit later, but I was been thinking about David's question from Adelaide about, well, should we go back to a older method and contest? Every single game plan depends on pressure and contested possessions and energy. And in the post-match game in Port, the players who were interviewed, they said, what was the turnaround? What was it all about? Pressure, contest. They all said the same thing. 150 in the first quarter in a must-win game was seriously just not acceptable, totally unacceptable. And I expect more from the players. There could be Goody will get a lot of criticism, but for me, a lot of it sheets home to the players, and in particular the senior players. Just not acceptable. And then in the last quarter, 157 to 181. So our first quarter was 150 to 180, a negative 30 differential. Our last quarter, we're playing for our season. We're playing for the fans. We're playing for, some sort of pride in the jumper. We could only manage 157 to their 181, 24 more. It's unbelievable. 14 down for the match, only 164 in a must-win game where we had an 8-day break, I think, wasn't it? Or at least a 7-day break. So no excuses on the conditioning front, although we're clearly not fit enough. That's an absolute that's as clear as day. But that does not excuse the lack of effort and pressure. And that tells in the post-clearance contested possessions. I said last week that it's the most significant contested possession data there is. Hardwick has, put emphasis on this for a decade or more. We were negative 22 for post-clearance contested possessions. They had 90 to our 68, and that says it all. Again, smashed on turnover. They scored 52 points. It's, they're all interconnected to the pressure. Pressure's the most important stat. Without it, you're not winning any games of footy. You're just simply not. And you give up on turnover 52 points. A lot of that comes back to our poor decision-making kicking, but theirs was just as woeful. I've joked on the podcast before about back in the old days, in the horror days of the late 70s and 80s, going to footy matches and, yelling out when we're smashed by Hawthorn or whoever, that, a good team would have beaten us by twice as much. Well, a good team would have beaten us by twice as much. Some of their kicking was as woeful as ours, but where that was most evident was, there'll be a bit of talk, and we'll talk about it later, about the forward line. Centre bounces, despite our centre bounce dominance, we only scored 1 point from centre bounces, but that was as much about how we exited our kicks, our last kick inside 50. In fact, I'd say it's almost all of that than the forward line. Again, we'll talk about it later, but the forward line, of course, you can criticise that, but it's the kicking inside. So, again, 25 points from turnover, another bad stat. So, I could have picked out a million more ugly stats. There was just, any number of stats you could point to, as a shocking performance. But allowing those uncontested possessions is about attitude, and it's about not coming to play at AFL standard level of pressure. 150 in that first quarter. Heads should roll in this team. There should be people dropped from this performance, and I would go hard if I was coaching the footy club, because it was just not acceptable.
If you were one of the coaches, Ben Man, and you just played the Geelong game where they had some extraordinary number of uncontested possessions, surely part of the game plan that you would have supposedly trotted out for this week would be, how are we going to stop uncontested possessions in this game?
There's an easy way.
I didn't detect any.
Well, there's a dead easy way that requires effort, which is just working your gut like your butt off to push up and not allow them. If you watch that Port game, Hawthorn were desperately trying to get control of that game by short kicking it around, and Port would not allow it. They pressed up their half-back line super hard. They rolled the dice. They had someone like Butters who pressed right up. That's why you need Windsor at half-back flank, because when they did turn the ball over, he had the wheels to get back and defend on turnover. But they were pressing up so high, and you could just see Port's, and I knew they'd bring it. That's why I backed them.
But that comes down to the coaching as well. So Port had a plan. You don't let Hawthorn have a free run, and surely after the Geelong game, we should have had the similar sort of plan. If the players aren't doing it, the coaches aren't as well.
Maybe
your training session, you say, okay, you've got to go to that position. You've got to man up on him, for a simple sort of solution.
Sure,
there was
that may
no evidence of that.
Have you guys not seen what's been happening the last few years with our coaching? They don't change anything. They trust in their method. We'll just beat them, rather than say, we've got a problem here, we need to do something differently. What can we do differently? No, we're going to trust in our system. The system's not working. So
the players... Trump
maybe the players aren't responsible.
The players do about our game plan at the moment. They've got no faith in that system. But I take your point, George, in terms of the coach coming in, and I'd ask two things. What about our controlling the ball? That's what we did so well against the Giants. It looked like that's what we had trained for in the off-season, us controlling the football, where we struggle to control the football. But one thing, though, I would say is, yes, I agree around the coaches having a plan, and you don't allow those uncontested. But what I really, really worry about, more than anything, to be honest, is that they did have that plan and the players couldn't be bothered implementing it. Because, as I said, we can criticise the coaches and we can say what they're doing, but if your players aren't, there's no hiding out in a footy field. And like I said, I watched, as best you can on television, Oliver really closely. Some of his defensive running was just unbelievably subpar. And, the coaches can take the horses to water, but they can't make them drink. And
I totally agree with that. The number of times, again, you can't see everything on the television. The number of times we had players just defending grass.
Just defending grass and pointing.
All,
Stick my head in, pointing as if there was footage they showed in that 40 minutes I watched after the game of Clary, and Track was, he had a good game, but also he doesn't, he's a bit slow defensively. But, it was, there was a lot of, 150, that's my point, is that number. If you press up, if you see Port's number, I don't know what it was, but I'll bet you in that first quarter, Port's pressure rating was up around 200 because they were busting their guts every time a Hawthorn player spread the ball to run over and make sure that it was difficult to move the ball on from that point and not allow them the chip mark.
All right, we do, before we get into our listener questions, we do have a caller on the line. Welcome to the Demonland podcast. Who am I talking to?
Oh, hi, guys. Is Sparganet.
Sparganet, how you doing?
Yeah. I don't know if you guys recall last year, Spargonagus rang in on my behalf.
That's correct. I do remember that, and I can see B-Man smiling, so he obviously remembers that too.
Glad I could bring a smile to an otherwise sad situation. Look, guys, I've just been observing this for the last few years, and I feel like this continual focus on a defensive style of play cannot do anything but put the team into a really negative frame of mind. And this behaviour of starting a game and almost waiting to see what the opponent is going to bring to the table and then try and determine how I might respond to that seems to be something that's been so deeply ingrained into the mindset and the culture of the team that I just can't see how they break out of that and start to apply their own style and brand to the game from the outset. And I just wondered what your thoughts were on that. Am I reading it right, or is this someone who's only about 5 or so years into watching the game, still learning to understand what she's seeing?
B-Man, you want to take that?
Look, partially, yes. I think, yes, we're going to talk about that a bit later on, I think. But, clearly one of the problems is that you've got one of the challenges Goody faces is that we are trying to implement a new method. And as I was at pains to say last year, we were trying to implement that method last year. I don't actually think that we're trying to copy necessarily the Hawthorn model, or, I've been arguing for a while now that Goody's trying to implement a sort of hybrid between an attacking game and strong defence. And it's what the Suns are trying to do as well, I think. But I think it's in football at the moment, as it is circa 2025, 100 points is the benchmark. When Melbourne were up and about, we were keeping teams, I think, from memory. Remember after the flag, Andy, there was talk about we had a fixed number each week that we're keeping teams under. It was 65.
65 or 70, yeah.
Yeah, well, that number now has to be 100. We keep teams under 100. We win, but then we need to score 100. So I think it's more, the challenge is you've got half a team who won a flag playing a defence-first model and all of that was drilled into them. And, they had the ultimate success. Can they transition to a more attacking mindset? I think there's a real challenge. Players like Lever, May, even Viney. You can see under pressure, Clary as well, and I have to say Track as well. Under pressure, they revert to, it makes sense to a degree, and, playing a method that won them a flag, which is kick long under pressure and then look to trap it in. You still need to apply all of those things. And personally, I think, at the moment, the scoring is really high, but come finals, is pressure and defence will win out. And I actually, ironically, think that the antidote to this method, which was brought in to stop our method of how brutally effective our defence was brought in to defeat that method. I actually think the method that will end up defeating this method is back to defence, back to really strong defence. It goes in cycles. my sort of short answer would be you've got half the team who have played in a particular way that's won them a flag, and another half of the team who are wanting to play a sort of get the ball moving quickly method that perhaps they've played as juniors and they've been watching for 2 or 3 years, and it's really difficult to implement a new game plan, and we're totally struggling to do so at the moment.
Sparganet, anything else?
Oh, look, yeah, thank you. I think that's probably right. I think the challenge then comes to the fundamental one that we're all grappling with, which is Goody the one who's going to be able to take us out of that, or is he so deeply entrenched in that mindset and culture that we need someone else to help bust us out?
I don't think he's. I think he's genuine. I mean, it's easy to forget how attacking he was in 2017 and 2018 as a coach. So it was after, we were the most attacking side in 2018. Mm. We're the most exciting team to watch when we're on. And he recognised that wasn't going to get the job done, and then changed his approach to be a much more, defensive coach in terms of, our one wood and our DNA being defense and contest. And so, I think that it's not like he's fixed in that particular model. I think he's innovative enough. I would say, has he got the teaching ability or the mindset to be able to change a method? That's the challenge for him. That's the real challenge. And I think that's the real challenge for any coach who's been around for a long time, who goes to their third, method essentially. So, for me, that's the question mark: has he got that ability to bring the club forward playing a new game method? And we'll get into it a little bit, but selecting a whole bunch of players who were stuck in that old style probably doesn't help.
The clock is ticking. Thank you, Sparganet. Really appreciate the call.
Bye.
Have a good night. Bye. All right, that was Sparganet. All right, let's get into our listener questions. Lazy writes, I asked this last week and I'll ask it again at 0-5. How do you sell hope to a supporter base? We're talking about fans who paid more than ever for memberships, just lost to a team holding our first pick, watched us concede uncontested marks and barely lay a tackle in the first 5 minutes. How do you sell to the fans that it's still worth turning up to the footy every week for the next 5 months? What's the selling point? We're grateful Melbourne supporters. We'll always appreciate what we achieved in recent years, but we've also spent a lot of our lives as the punchline to a joke. And now, with a long, potentially painful season ahead, that old feeling is creeping back in. The whole new week, fresh hope message is wearing thin. Every game feels like a replay of the last. Many of us will still show up because we're rusted on, but we all know what happens when the hope dies. The crowds disappear. And let's be honest, we'll probably see that again soon. So to you guys, and I know all three of you will keep going, what would make you want to go to Melbourne games week after week for the rest of 2025 if you were one of the fans losing the faith? So, Big Man, how do you respond to fans like Lazy, in fact, a large portion of the D Milan community or the wider D's community who are trying to find a reason to keep believing?
Well, I'd say that people's frustration and upset is completely justified. And I was thinking about it over the weekend, being so devastated about how we're travelling and about another loss. And it's, but it's long past asking the question, it is, should I be this invested in a footy club and a sporting team? And the reality is I am. Which is why I'm so furious at the effort level, because, I expect to see the players playing with that spirit as well. But it goes back to my point that I was trying to make, that I lost my thread on, in terms of the communication. For me, I want clear communication from the club, Goody, whoever it is, about, well, what path are we on now? If they're serious about, we're going to implement a new game method and this is what we're going to do, they've talked around the edges what it looks like. They don't have to go into specifics, Andy, about breaking it down. If that's what they're serious about. What I would like to see is the club being clear that that's what we're doing. It's we've not got a CEO. We're going to interim CEO. We've got a review that was supposed to pick up some of these things we don't know the outcome of. I want some clear communication on what they expect from fans. The beginning of the season, the messaging was we were in a show for making finals. That was the expectation that at the season launch that we were in the position to make finals. That was the messaging, and the messaging's been we're going to be implementing this sort of change method that we were implementing it last year, and that we blinked and we went back to a defensive mindset. Well, that wasn't messaged last year, and I don't think it helped our fans trying to reconcile what's going on. That's what I expect from the club. And if they do that, then I'm in. I'm supporting it. That's what we're going to do. For me, though, there's a few things that come with it, and one of which is if that's what we're going to do, let's select players who are going to implement it no matter what, even if that means losses. I can hack losses. I've seen lots of Melbourne losses over the years, but I don't want another game like that where it's not clear that there's buy-in to the method. It's not clear what we're actually trying to do with it. But if they can be clear on that and select accordingly, I talked about pressure then. Nathan Brown had, 12 or 11 tackles the week before. That's the sort of player I want to see in the side. It's a non-negotiable tackling. George has been talking about it for ages, the lack of tackling in our forward line. At least we did a little bit more of it, although it didn't seem that evident watching live. But I want some clarity from the club, what it is that they're trying to achieve from this point. Is it that we're going to position ourselves to have this new method, and then I want them to select accordingly. And if that means playing Tolstrup and Nathan Brown and Fullerton and those sorts of players and Seston, and then so be it. If that means dropping players like, Melksham, even Clary after that performance, I'd be looking at dropping him on that sort of body language. That's what I want to see. I'll go week in, week out. What about you, Andy? How do you feel about all of that?
I want change. I'd go. I think I'd go even further than that. I think we need ultimate change. I think we need a whole clean out. You can't clean out, and I'm talking about wholesale changes, not just week to week. Now, what we do for the footy club, I think we need a big change. But unfortunately, you can't change the coach mid-year. You can sack a coach and bring in an interim, but I think we won't have to.
Nightmare.
No.
Yeah.
But I don't know. For 5 weeks in, there's no. Lazy's asking about how do you sell hope. I don't know. Anything he says, bullshit. But go on.
It's pretty simple. Exactly what Binman was saying just then. This is about honesty and transparency. Come out and tell us exactly what you want. And we record. Richmond know exactly what Richmond are doing this year. They know that they went to the draft alone, and it was going to cause a lot of pain for Richmond supporters for the next year or two, or however long it takes. But everybody knows exactly what they're doing. A couple of years ago, Sam Mitchell stood up in front of a press conference and said exactly the same thing at Hawthorn. I'm out to build a team to win premierships. I don't care about the short term that's going on, but we're going to keep playing these kids. And guess what? 2 years later, Hawthorn are challenging the top end of the ladder. We need to, and we'll talk about it later, but that letter from Brad Green tells absolutely nothing about where we're going. Not one person will go through the gate as a result of that letter that weren't going in the first place. You've got to come out and say, this is where we're at, this is what we're doing. And as Binman said, if that means playing the younger kids who
But what younger kids? Who's in the Casey that is part of our future? That's a young kid.
Well, we haven't got many, but we might as well bring in people like Seston or Kynan Brown. Or
Fullerton, Nathan Brown and Kynan Brown.
Or Fullerton or Kentfield, and you go, okay, we're not going to win the games putting in these old 32-year-olds and 33-year-olds that we've currently got holding the play together, but it's going to cause a lot of pain. And if these kids aren't up to it, at least we've found out. So,
back in 2019 and 20, when players weren't signing up for and playing the method that Goody was trying to implement, who refused to zone off, that's why Frost was left the footy club, because he wouldn't zone off in the way that Goody wanted him to. Goody was, we talked about it last week. He was hardcore in that year. He got rid of Watts. There was a couple of other who that comes to mind who escape me now. Kent, and he was brutal about the method and saying, "This is if you don't buy into our zone, then you're not playing in this team." Now that's what he's got. That's what I want to see. I want to say this is the way we're playing it. So what? And in terms of not giving away tradecraft or whatever, say this is how we want to play it, and this is exactly the sort of fundamentals of how we play. People who don't want to play in that method, we're not going to select you. And whether that's a Oliver, whether that's a
half the team don't want to play that. You can tell
then-
it must be. What are you going to do? Sack them all?
So the question is, and we've all been here before, haven't we? At times where we go, we weren't thinking round one we're going to be looking at a rebuild.
No.
But if they've, so the answer to that question is if I will put my faith and support behind the club if this is the direction that they want to go, but they need to be clear about that, and then they need to make decisions accordingly about and select players who will play with that method.
Yeah, look, I agree, but I agree with George saying that if the club has to be honest in the direction they want to go and say we're going to play the kids, but I think the club, the people behind the scenes, I don't have any inside information or anything. I think they're a week away from sacking the coach, so they're not going to come out this week when they're trying to get people to the Fremantle game and go, don't worry, we're going to sack the coach in a week or two. But I guarantee we're going to get thumped this week. We're going to probably lose to Richmond in a few weeks. The coach is gone, so it's interim coach till the end of the year, and then maybe they can sell some hope. Sorry if I'm upsetting anyone here, but that's where we're heading.
Right.
So forget the buy-in because the players are totally checked out. I'm going to be completely honest. I was watching players who were totally checked out. I've heard from so many people who have DM'd me, given me all these information. This player wants out, that player wants out. I don't know if it's true or not. It's clear that the Goody, whatever, has lost the coach. The team, the club, has lost the players. They've lost the players. Now, I don't know if all this is true, but it's bloody upsetting, and it makes me furious that a couple of years ago we were looking at a dynasty, and somehow this club, as it always fucking does, just throws it all in the bin, and I don't know what bloody happened. I don't know what, but it's disgusting and disgraceful, and it's got to be turned around. And if that's Brad Green, great. If not, fuck off and bring someone else into the club to bring some more better people into the club. Steve Smith, whatever you got to do, you got to fix this fucking club because it's absolutely disgraceful that we are sitting 0-5. We've been promised the world, and apologies for the swearing, but it's fucking making me angry.
I couldn't tell.
Something's got to change.
Look, that's I guess when after the end of the first quarter and 15 minutes into the second quarter, that's how it felt. Like I've seen this movie before. We've been down this path a bazillion times. We've seen coaches go, we've seen clubs go, and the canary in the coal mine is a quarter of footy like that we saw dished up in Adelaide. Like the effort level was appalling. So like day follows night, get you sorted out off field. It's always the way. I know we've got a question about that later, the governance, but that's always the way. The best clubs have the best functioning off field. But still, all of that aside is that I'm not going to give the players an out. I refuse to let the players off the hook. It just drives me
neither
nuts.
am I.
Like you see Langdon in that game, Langdon run himself into the ground. Like his effort level and Bowie's effort level, was, like I said a couple of weeks ago, is my estimation of players is based around how they play when things are not going well and in losing side. So I could not have been more respectful, Langdon. And my expectation is every player who pulls on a Melbourne jumper plays with that sort of effort level, regardless of what the coach is doing, regardless of what the off-field's doing. I know that's a bit unreal and naive. That's not how it plays out, but that's how it looked. There was, exactly as George said, a lot of covering grass and a lot of finger pointing, and then,
Yeah, and it's an indictment on the players as well. If Goody's lost the players, if that's what it is, it's an indictment on the players as well for them to throw the baby out with the bathwater and to not give their all for the jumper because they don't agree with the coach's game plan, they don't understand it, they don't like it, they don't want it, whatever. That's bad too. but you can't get rid of all the players at once.
No.
Unfortunately. All right, let's move on to the next one before I get angry, and I'll probably get angrier at each one.
Before you get angry.
Yeah.
Is just for viewers at home or listeners on the pod, Andy's just turned a shade of green and got very muscly. It's quite impressive, actually.
Yeah, I know. Been eating my spinach. Supreme Demon says, what is wrong?
Heard in Belgium, Terence is on the line and has commented on about your outburst there, Andy.
Okay, someone in our chat room, demonland.com/podcast. You can find that if you are listening live. Supreme Demon says, what is wrong? What is going wrong with this club? Do the Melbourne players have any respect or loyalty for the jumper? I believe, sadly, that Simon Goodwin's position as coach has become untenable. We owe him our gratitude for the 2021 premiership, and we always will. But it's time to address the rot that's set in. A coaching change is needed. It's not a question of if, but when. In under 4 years, we've gone from breaking a 57-year premiership drought to becoming a laughingstock. It's a staggering fall from grace, and it simply can't be tolerated. Whatever unfolds this year, one thing is clear: massive changes are needed, and yet another full-scale football department review must take place at season's end. No one should be considered untouchable. Heads need to roll. Doug Reamer says Goodwin, Lamb and Griffiths all need to go. The game plan stinks. Recruitment stinks. I think it's time to look at Max's captaincy and the support underneath him. He must be tired after the last 3 to 4 years. Max's cryptic dialogue on Triple M last week almost sounded like a cry for help. And talking about leadership, something from each year. Talking about learning something from each year. Where's the fight? Where's the inspiration? He sounded like he's already conceded. BW511 says, I've played under a number of different coaches in my local footy career. One year we had a coach that came in off the back of a finals campaign the year before. We finished second or third last under the new coach with the same list, and the entire place was deflated like I've never seen before until now. That particular coach sucked the life out of the group in the space of 7 to 8 months, and that club has not recovered since, some 20 years later. Do you guys believe the players are still playing like they trust Goodwin and want him around? And Wells 11 says, excuse the length of this. I'm just trying to find something to make me feel better. I can't find where to start. To state the obvious, we've got a coaching group that now looks alarmingly second-rate, and that includes fitness, tactics and cohesion. Our playing group is starting to look either too old and lacking the foot skills and pace for the modern game, or too young and completely out of form. Honestly, it's giving me the old Neil'd era vibe, like the coach has lost the players. We've got a huge chunk of the salary cap tied up in 2 players, Track and Oliver, who at this stage of 2025 you could only describe as average. Cozzy, arguably our best player right now, looks like he wants out. And perhaps worst of all, we still don't have a home base. And in this economic climate, it's hard to see that changing anytime soon. We all know how many issues that creates for a club. Forget 2025, this feels like the beginning of a decade of pain. Are we heading back to 2012 or, and this is the scarier thought, are we already there and just waking up to it now? I've got a couple of voicemails to play, one from Adam from Sunshine Coast and one from a voicemail from Demonologist. And we did have one from Rosestar, we only had one, and in it he said, he just went through the 2-minute time limit and then continued on, and it just didn't make sense. So we'd missed the whole thing. So sorry, Rosestar, you didn't get on this week, but I appreciate the call. Adam from Sunshine and then Demonologist.
Hello, Andy, George and Binman. It's Adam calling in from the Sunshine Coast.
Sunshine Coast, not Sunshine.
Another wretched performance on the weekend. Look, I'm probably flogging a dead horse and joining a pylon here. I think it's probably time to concede that many of our critics in the media and on Demonland, frankly, have been proven correct over the past 2 years about how much of a mess our forward line and entries are, and now we're really starting to see the fruits of the inability of the coaching staff to, do something about it. Early on, I tried to make excuses and rationalisations about it, but after coming to the realisation that there was a problem, I drank the Kool-Aid and thought the coaches and list managers would have a workable plan to fix it, and clearly they haven't, and clearly they don't. So to give George his flowers, he's always arguing for a more qualitative approach to analysing the game, and it's pretty clear now that as far as this issue goes, the eye hasn't been lying, and many of our media critics have been right for a pretty long time now. So the question is this: is it time to hold the coaches and football department accountable for their failure to fix a problem that's been obvious to so many for so long at this point? Anyway, thanks for all the work you do. Love the show.
Now we've got Demonologist.
G'day guys, it's Demonologist here. I have a series of questions based on Goody's own responses in his latest presser. He said the team is not yet to the required level. I ask, why isn't it? He said pressure on the ball wasn't to the level it should have been. Or why isn't the team at the required level? He said Melbourne was a completely different team in the third quarter. Well, why weren't we that team in quarters 1, 2 and 4? He said the team's efforts are not there long enough. Why aren't they? He said the team needs more fight, consistency and intensity. But why isn't this being addressed? Goodwin said we need to get players into better form. Why are so many out of form, I ask? He said we are still bombing the ball long. Why hasn't this yet been fixed? Elite footballers will be receiving match reviews on poor decision-making, advice on fixing errors. Why isn't this improving? Why aren't we seeing a player response? According to Goodwin, it's going to turn and will be away, he says. But why should we expect it to turn? Goodwin believes he still has the credentials to keep coaching Melbourne, but why should we believe him? I suspect the entire MFC supporter base and membership group have lost complete and utter confidence in Goodwin, and the entire coaching group for that matter, to be able to turn this around. So, at what point does the club realise that the decision time is now upon them? So why wait? Anyway, many thanks, guys. Cheers.
All right, George, the drums, they're beating louder with every loss. Has your position changed this week or even in the last few minutes based on these calls?
No, I think our callers have all made, and the people who've sent in the questions have all made very, very valid points. And quite frankly, I think we all agree with them, the way things have panned out certainly in the last 4 weeks. At the start of this program, I spoke about Kubler-Ross and the stages of grief. I think a lot of people have moved past the denial stage, but you've got to recognise where we are at the moment. The important thing that people are still coming to grips with, I think, is that the premiership was 4 years ago. Premiership windows do not stay open for a very long period of time. The history of who's won premierships right back over the last 100 plus years, there's only one team that's won 4 premierships in a row. There's a couple of teams that have won 3 in a row. So 3 to 4 years over 100 years of data indicate that your premiership window lasts about 3 or 4 years at the most. We're now out beyond that. And the reason is that the players get older, the competition gets turned over to younger players who are up and coming from other sides. It just happens. Have a look at Richmond today. They won a premiership 1 year ahead of us, and now they're sitting, in pretty similar sort of position in terms of wins and hopes.
I'll take their 3 flags and spend a few years on
we had the
on
opportunity. We can go into all sorts of reasons why that didn't happen, but the fact is that the opportunity's gone now. West Coast is another classic example, and we are following West Coast. If we don't do anything today, we are following exactly the same path as West Coast, who won a premiership in 2018. In 19 and 20, they finished up in finals, same as we did. In 21, they won 10 games in total. Between 22 and 24, in those 3 years, they've won 10 games in total as well over 3 years. That's the path we will follow if we continue not to address the problems that we've got. We've identified all sorts of things already in this podcast, and we'll identify a few more. Our trading's been awful. Our fitness is awful. Our age profile for all our really talented, what we knew were really talented players, is awful. And they're all factors, but they have to be addressed. And the sooner they're addressed, the less pain will occur, but pain is coming.
But big man, before you go, I'm not even asking for premierships. Yes, that's what I want. I just don't want to be a basket case. I don't want to be the laughing stock. Every scandal. Every time I open the paper or Twitter, I'm expecting to see something that we've done. Some players done something stupid. I just don't want that. I want to be Geelong. Take even just those one bookended premierships, but just be competitive, be up there, be in it to win it. And we're just not that. We're just not. Always, we just end up. We had that one little tiny window was open for a little bit, and we're just back to being a basket case. Go ahead, Pete.
Well, it's interesting that Andy, you raised Geelong, and George, you West Coast. Interesting because Goody, right from the get-go, right from 2016 when he was appointed, and 2017, 2018, he said that what he wanted Melbourne Footy Club to be like is Geelong, is that consistently competitive, and Geelong and Sydney, consistently competitive. You knew what you were going to get week in, week out, which was, regardless of what was happening, effort and contest and defence. And that it was about staying in that window for as long as possible. Geelong have been, credit to them, have been brilliant at it. Ditto Sydney. And the thing that both of those clubs have that we just don't have, and is an absolute prerequisite for that sort of model, is incredibly strong off-field governance and systems. I mean, it is just good communication, good crisis management, good reviews that have traction. Like the review that kept Thompson in his job, that he went on to win the Flags, for instance, with real outcomes communicated to their members. They've been brilliant at it, being able to attract good players, topping up, going to the draft when needed. I mean, their model has been similar to ours. We've brought in some really quality young players. That's what Geelong have done. They've topped up with Cameron and obviously Dangerfield as well, and Sydney as well. They've recruited well, and but the thing those two clubs share is they're both brilliant off field. They're stable. You don't hear gossip about them. You don't hear much. They control the narrative very effectively. Well-run clubs. It's the only way of doing it. Now, it's interesting, George, you said West Coast. I hadn't considered that. One of the similarities that Melbourne, to be honest, are running the risk of right now is one of the problems that's hamstrung West Coast for the last few years, which is a whole bunch of players who were paid a whole lot of money. They just dropped Tim Kelly, didn't they?
Yeah.
He must be just about their second or third highest player. They had, was it not Barras? Who was a player that Melbourne were into for ages? Left footer, number 6.
Gaff.
Gaff.
Yeah.
Gaff. Andrew Gaff
number 3
was like on $750,000 a year and running around in the waffle. They've got, we run that same risk of having players who are being played heaps who aren't, going to be part of the next premiership, or at least not, a bridge to the next premiership, like, Clary and, I'm not necessarily putting Track in that basket as well, but, and Viney, and, do you know what I mean? We've got some high-end players who maybe, aren't, or at the moment, aren't contributing the sort of work that we need them to contribute. And on top dollar, and so make it difficult then, therefore, us to spread that money around and bring young players in like the way Richmond have. Sorry, Andy.
Sorry, so I'm mute. No, I'm done. I don't have anything to say. We can go on to the next one if you're done. And we are. Palace D's writes, for my own mental health, I haven't read one Team Land post since pre-game. Sounds like you've been mad. So please give me... please forgive me if this has been raised elsewhere. In 2025, total last quarter scores are 5 goals 11-41, and against 26 goals 10-166. That's a 21 goal differential, 125 points. The last quarter pressure rating against Geelong was a disgusting 139. I'll be interested in knowing our ratings for Saturday's match. Well, you would have heard it if you listened to Big Man's stats files. The reverence I felt for the 2021 Premiership team is being diluted as I see so many of them running around a shadow of their former selves. Andy, George, Big Man, please explain. Help ease my pain. Love your work, fellas. I don't know how you can keep doing the podcast during this time of deep despair. Colordi says, our fourth quarters are garbage. Is this Selwyn Griffith's fault, or are too many players just not showing any heart? 48 years now says, I've watched footy for decades, At its core, footy fitness isn't complicated. Players need to be able to run and walk for 2 hours. We constantly hear about players covering 14 to 15 kilometres during games. So how hard can it really be for a well-paid fitness professional to get highly paid athletes fit enough to run out 4 quarters? And as someone else pointed out, how did Darren Burgess's program not become a standard operating procedure at our club? Supreme Demon asks, what the hell is going on with our fitness levels? Selwyn Griffith, our head of fitness, must come under scrutiny, shouldn't he? We are either running out of steam or giving up in the fourth quarter. It is humiliating. Nairobi Demon asks, to what extent is our fourth quarter fade out the result of conditioning versus attitude? Is there any evidence from Demonland training reports that we're doing heavy loads on the track? No, not the L word. Big man, there's no doubt about it. Fitness, it's a major issue at the D's right now. We're not just running out. We're just not running out quarters, let alone full games. And there's a problem with skills, the game plan, it's an issue, the attitude's an issue, but at the heart of it, fitness levels simply just aren't where they were during the premiership season or the years that we, consistently sat in the top 4. It's dropped off dramatically. I was going to say, people are asking or pointing the finger at Selwyn Griffiths, but I mean, could it be the players as well? They're just not fit. They're not responding. Just like we've been saying, maybe the coaches, maybe they're not playing for the coaches. Maybe they're not training hard for the fitness guys. Hard for us to nail down who's at fault, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that I was funny you should say that, because that was exactly what I was just thinking, is that 100% questions have to be asked about our high performance program. We ran out of steam last year by the club's own admission. Now, we had injuries or whatever, but, I'll tell you what, something for free, is there's no way Draper and De Koning talks in an interview on national TV and says, you know how to beat Melbourne is you get it on the outside and run them into the ground. So it's obviously industry knowledge that we're not fit enough. Like, it is just as clear as day. And so again, it goes back to my comment about the messaging. So the question I would ask, if that's the case, and we're clearly not running, I mean, the data is, it's of course attitude's part of it, but the two are interconnected. If you're knackered, you're like, as much as you want to try hard and get to the next contest, if you can't do it, you can't do it. But of course there's an attitude thing, and that was why I was so furious in the first quarter. You're as fresh as you're going to ever be in that first quarter and the third quarter. They're the 2 times you get a break at things, so to refill your batteries at halftime and obviously coming into the game. They're your 2 key quarters for when you're going to be as fit, as in good condition in any given match. And our effort was woeful. So attitude is there, but the numbers are off the charts for our last quarter. They're just unbelievable, like historically off the charts. I forget that question is. That's totally right. We were so unwatchable, like in that first quarter. It was like painful to watch. It was, it was something totally whacked out. But I think that point, Andy, such a good one, is that, as good as a high performance program is, it requires everyone giving 110%. Maybe, they'd know, the club would know the numbers that were run. They would know people that write down, they'd have the best, most sophisticated data available to get a sense of where they're at fitness wise. But, I guess, to be honest, that's right. Is if you look at Adelaide, they look dog hungry at the moment. And Burgess has got him in that same sort of way of, that talk that they use, we're the fittest team and all of that stuff that we were in 21. We were clearly the fittest team then. You need to be at least level now, and we're down. There's no question. So big questions have to be asked about that. But I really agree, Andy. That's a totally valid and excellent question. Is, did the players do the work over in the off season that we had hoped them to? And if they didn't, I've made this analogy a few times, is it's all of that work pre-season is like baking a cake. You don't actually know what it fully looks like until it's out of the oven. Well, it's out of the oven and it's gone completely flat at the moment. Whether they're loading, as I said last week, I said maybe they're looking at a different model and that they're trying to gear it so that we don't collapse at the end of the season. And if that's got any truth to it, like that's a total thought bubble, but if it's got any truth to it, I'd be even twice as furious, because who would go to Adelaide and dish up that sort of effort is club killing, it's coach killing. It's like, it's not going to get people to footy. 2 goals in the perfect conditions to half time, and we didn't even look like kicking more than 2 goals.
George? Anything
And
to
spare
say?
me that third quarter. Fair dinkum. I was furious with that third quarter as much as anything. It's like, what are they turning up for now? And so that question, like, is it not go Lordy? Is it 48 years now? That's right. Why not turn up when they're at the beginning? No, sorry, go Lordy. Why turn up at the beginning of the match?
The other question, I don't know about the fitness. It certainly doesn't look very good from the outside. But the other question I do know is the age factor. You can't make anyone run faster or run longer as they get older. There's a good reason why Gout's running sub-20s. It's because he's 17 years of age at the moment.
But that doesn't actually fly in. The fastest they're in there, like late 20s.
But all I'm saying is we've got too many players. In this game, one of the most telling ones for me was when Melcham was trying to chase someone coming out of our forward line. He just could not do it. He's simply too old now. Yeah. Stephen May can't run. Tom Mack is a great endurance athlete, but he's not a fast runner.
He's our quickest. He's consistently our second or third quickest player,
and that's the sad part, isn't it? Yeah. And we've got a number of players. Max isn't fast. Salem is not fast. We've got a whole stack of young players who look promising, but we've got too many of these old players who it doesn't matter how many training sessions you put into, they will not get any better.
But what I would say to that, though, is that they were never fast, those players. None of those players were fast. Oliver was a little bit faster than he is now, but none of them, even track, none of them were ever quick. So we've always been Sparrow played his 100th game, so congrats, it's a bad wonder. But he's not particularly fast, is he? So we've got a core of fast players. But I don't buy into this aging, 28, 29 in modern sport, as we've talked about a little bit, look how powerful and dynamic, even, what's his name last night? I was watching him. What's the Port's old captain, number 10? Boak, he's still pushing through contests. Dangerfield has been unbelievable this season. Those players, look at Gorney, how incredibly consistent his elite performance is. So, I think that we've had too many players drop off, to be honest, who aren't pushing through and maybe are a bit satisfied. Again, Oliver's really struggling to be dynamic in the way he was, and maybe he's not going to get there.
Got another caller on the line. Caller, welcome to the Demonland podcast. Who am I talking to?
Oh, hi. It's David from Adelaide again. How are you, boys?
G'day, David. How you go, mate?
Well, I thought I'd ring in since I went to the game personally on Saturday.
Yep.
Just a few thoughts. First of all, I have to agree with Bin Man. When you're actually at the game live, you see the poor kicking skills a lot more than probably you do on TV. And particularly in the first half, the skills were just deplorable. I mean, I lost count the number of times there were turnovers by simply kicking to an opposition player. I see Brad Green has written today that we should get some hope from our performance in the third quarter. In fact, that's what really concerned me, because for about 15 minutes, we demonstrated that we were equal to, if not a better side than Essendon. But they just couldn't keep it up. I mean, they did absolutely nothing in that last quarter. And to me personally, I find it inexplicable as to why you can play good football for 15 to 20 minutes and then come out in the last quarter and do absolutely nothing. It may be fitness. That's a possibility, but the intensity wasn't that much. I mean, they only scored 2 goals in a half of football. And I personally, watching the game, could not fathom as to why, after performing well for about 15 to 20 minutes, actually looking the better team and looking like they'd get over the top of Essendon, again, they did absolutely nothing in the last quarter.
Yeah. It's remarkable. George, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I found it literally remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you're as flummoxed as we are. We're trying to find reasons, and we're hoping to find reasons, but it is simply unbelievable that a team can play that well for that period of time against what is and what will be found out to be a very ordinary side of Essendon, and then do nothing, absolutely nothing. But nothing infuriates me more than looking at the players standing still defending grass while their opponents use them as witches' hats effectively. That's all about effort. And
in that third quarter, there are also David. In that third quarter, there are also a couple of like our issues with our kicking were also came to the fore because we had the opportunity to actually get in front of them and take advantage of the momentum, and we made a couple of skill errors where they punished us on one and went up the other end, and then we also did another in that run where we just had options where we didn't give it, where we kicked long instead of giving hands and creating that overlap. And I know it wasn't in the third quarter, but one of my most frustrating ones of the night was Track not kicking that goal and getting run down from behind, taking time to come up 15 metres out, kick the ball, Track. What are you doing? And that's the intensity, David, that you're talking about from the Essendon player, whoever that was, chasing him down.
Durham
was it? It's like that, and we weren't playing with that intensity.
Look, I accept we're a flawed side. I accept we're slow. I also accept that our kicking skills may not be up to par. It still doesn't explain as to how we could play in the first game of the season at the level we did and played that third quarter at the level we did and then just play in such a putrid fashion for the rest of the match. And that I don't understand, because if they played poorly the entire of the match, then you just say, well, we're just not in it in regard to it. But they demonstrated that they could be in it. And I believe that there must be things in the background which I'm not privy to and which I think most of the members aren't going on, because it's hard to explain rationally the absolute poor performance given we've got 15 premiership players, an experienced squad, and a squad that demonstrates at time, like in the first match of the season and in the third quarter, that they're capable of pretty good football, pretty good competitive football. I mean, in that third quarter, there was flashes of 221. I was there at the grand final. I remember it. So I just, there must be something going on. I mean, they just dropped their heads so quickly. And as I said, particularly the last quarter, I was flummoxed. I could not understand why they were so poorly motivated in the last quarter after pushing Essendon to within 2 or 3 goals and putting themselves in a position where the match was winnable. I mean, Essendon aren't that great a side.
No, they should have put us away in that first quarter. The game should have been dead after that first quarter.
Exactly right. I mean, I remember turning around to people I was with and saying, well, if this was Brisbane or if this was a quality side, they would have destroyed us in the first quarter. We wouldn't have even got a chance to get back to the game. But I'm not one to immediately go to the solution of replacing the coach, but there seems to be something awfully wrong there. I mean, they don't seem to be playing for the coach. There seems to be some fundamental morale problem. As I said, I don't pretend to know what it is. I don't, because quite frankly, I'm not privy to the sort of information you'd need to know that sort of stuff. But there is something really wrong, and it's more than just injuries, and it's more than just a lack of capacity to do something. They just don't fire. It's just, I mean, as I said, I was absolutely perplexed about their performance in that last quarter. I just could not work it out, and I still don't in regard to it. Anyway, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk.
Thanks,
Good on you, David.
Really appreciate the call, and thank you. Call again. All right.
I think of it, David's in Adelaide watching the game, and that question that from Lazy about the, what do you need, and about the passion of fans and how much we love the club and how much we, how important the Melbourne Footy Club is. I think of one of the regular listeners and a long-term poster on Demonland, D. Old Fart, who is terrific in the, gives us feedback about the podcasts and regularly drives interstate with his partner to watch games, and did for this game. Drove over, he said last week that he was on his way across to in the posts in the podcast thread that he was on the way listening to the podcast on the way
Yep.
to Gather Round for the second year in a row. That's the sort of contribution of the club that Brad Green's talking about. Well, what must have DL Fart and his partner must have thought, in the first 15 minutes of the game, when you can always tell it's the first 10 minutes, you can tell when a team so-called quote unquote turned up. We didn't turn up, turn up for 20 minutes in the third quarter. As I said, it makes it even worse.
Yeah, but the D old farts are always going to go to the game even after performances like that. It's those,
but
the
it's more
others that aren't going to
that's what
come the next few weeks.
That's the sort of passion, though, that Melbourne fans have, and that the club, the coach, the players are letting us down when they don't bring that passion to the game. And that's what, David, even if you get flogged, you can forgive a lot when you know that your team's busted a gut and did left nothing on the table, which is what I loved about Clary last year. Regardless of him being underdone, he left nothing on the table, and he didn't on the weekend.
Well, from leaving nothing on the table to the selection table, Radish D writes, this one really felt like it was lost on Thursday. How's that for a segue? The selection integrity just doesn't seem to be there. We've lost disposal and the tackle count 2 weeks in a row. Last week's individual tackle counts: May, Rivers, Spargo 0, Petrarca, Langford, Fritsch, Windsor, Henderson, Petty 1, Melksham, Chandler, Sharp 2. That's almost half the team with 2 or fewer tackles. None of those players were dropped. Tackling doesn't require skill, just effort. Yet the selection committee selected all of those players again. The only one dropped was Turner with 3 tackles and a goal. This week's tackle count: Petty, Sharp, Lindsay, Henderson 0, Langdon, Pickett, Spargo, May 1, Gawn, Salem, Bowie, Melksham, Sparrow, Van Royen, McDonald, Windsor 2. That's 2/3 of the team with 2 or fewer tackles. Will the selection committee make a statement this week and actually drop some of the players that aren't putting the effort in? Curiously, over the last 10 games, we are 3rd in total pressure acts, but 17th in tackles. What does the panel think is causing that? Can we assume that our opponents know this, so they are happy to invite pressure because this isn't significant downside? And Dice notes we had 9 players without a single tackle to halftime: Bowie, Henderson, Langford, Lindsay, McDonald, Melksham, Petty, Pickett and Spargo. We have not won the tackle count all year. Nairobi Demon adds, why was Turner dropped? He came in after a 5-goal haul in the VFL, was decent against Geelong, I think our 5th or 6th highest rated player, and yet was dropped despite other players contributing far less. So, George, those tackling stats are absolutely damning, and they probably highlight a deeper issue that's crept into the group, a real lack of effort and intensity. It seems to have infected the entire team. And do you think it's time we start rewarding genuine effort from players performing in the seniors or at Casey? And should the selection committee send a message by promoting those who are having a dip in the twos and demoting those in the seniors who aren't bringing the required intensity? And I know we've talked about a lot about the lack of depth at Casey, and we've talked about tonight, but for all reports, we have players that are kicking bags of goal there: Fullerton, Turner, others are racking up tackles like Brown. It feels like accountability has gone missing, and maybe a few selection shocks are exactly what's needed to shake the group up.
There's a couple of questions here, and I'd be delighted to see some selection shocks. And we'll talk about what we think should be who should be selected later on. The tackling versus the pressure is exactly related to effort. It's all very well to chase someone, but you don't have the effect unless you actually are right, as Binman said in the Port Adelaide game. You've got to be right up in their face to be an effective chase or corralling. Tackling is tackling, and we're just not doing it at the moment, as was highlighted by our poster. So it's a real problem, and when you're just guarding grass, you won't be tackling because you're nowhere near the player that you need to be tackling and putting the pressure on them. So that's one thing. The other thing is the selection panel. Once again this week, it was lost on Thursday, for crying out loud. Turner's kicked 5 goals the previous week at Casey. He's run up and down the ground, done everything he needs to do, comes in for 1 week and gets dropped. Fullerton at Casey does everything he's required to do, kicks 5 goals as well, up and down the ground, running around, doing and doesn't get selected. So we go into the game with one forward.
Who's a backup ruckman as well, mate.
Who's a backup ruckman as well.
Who's in totally woeful form.
Yeah. The blindingly obvious problem with that is when he goes into the ruck, we have no one in the forward line. No tools.
Yeah, we do.
And we had Spargo trying to outmark Ridley in this game, for crying out loud. You know, that was just ridiculous. And then to top it off, we take Petty out of the back line and put him up the forward line because they recognise they haven't got any tall forwards. When Van Rooyen's in the ruck, he's buggered at the end of it. He goes off the ground, and guess what? We've got no tall forwards again. So we go for whole quarters without an effective forward line. That was all the selection problem. We were just chasing one problem that they created on the Thursday night, and we're still trying to solve it by putting Petty up forward. And then, goodness gracious, guess what happens? The back line falls apart because we haven't got the number of defenders down there that we need. It's just ridiculous, and it's been going on for a while. There are some things that we might suggest at the end when we get to next week's game, but at the moment, if we keep following the same path, we will see the same result again. And JVR, you can just imagine he's 21 now or something. Here we go again. He'll be thinking, oh God, I've got to go into the ruck again, get the whatever's knocked out of me by some of the best ruckmen in the game, and then I'm expected to go back and play against the best backman in the side. You know, the poor kid is being shattered by what he's being expected to do. Give him a break.
Now, I know before you go, man, just talking about JVR, he's going to be on the first plane back to WA as soon as he can. And with Oscar Allen probably leaving, they're going to need a full forward. They're going to throw a bucket load of cash at him to do it, and he'll probably go.
No, he's got to
forget the state West Coast are in.
West Coast are going to chuck a bucket load of cash at him.
Well, whatever they'll.
But one thing I agree with much of what you just said, George, and again, that's the sort of there's I don't know exactly what it means, selection integrity, but when you're not performing well, you bring up players who are performing well. It's like the oldest rule in the book, isn't it? It's footy 101, and Fullerton deserved to call up after we're historically poor at scoring goals, and you've got a bloke who's played 2 good games in a row and kicked 5, could have been 8, and can ruck and can be a second tall. But one thing I would say, though, is that once they made that decision to go small, okay, no worries, then again, it's the question. It's another good example. Surely the coach's message would have been lower your eyes and forwards, get on your bike and lead into space and give a option that the ball carriers coming towards the 50 can provide. There was none of that. And then on top of that, there's so many kicks. You highlighted one where it was doing my head in. Why kick to a contest when you've got small players? Is that because the Spargos or those medium players, the Melkshams, they're not running to space to create an option? Or is it because players up the field Track and Viney and Oliver, a bit like Spargotis, is it
Sparganet? Sparganet is Spargonicus's partner or
that's what I sort of think is an example of what I meant by, a bit of that's the players, of those older players, sort of their muscle memory goes back to this old style of kicking it long and trapping it in the forward 50. Not much point kicking it long to Spargo versus, Redmond and 2 or 3 players, but they did that time and time again. I know there's a question about the forward line, and we'll unpack it a bit more then, but I think the biggest, I've been critical of the criticism of the forward line to a degree, but there was no movement. You've got to lead up at the target. You've got to give people a target. So I'll leave it more for because we've got
there is a question about it. Let's go to the next one. Bowser Power says, people complain a lot about the forward line and coach when the midfield and the back line are just as bad. Why is this? Lazy says, people often focus on our game plan from a ball movement perspective, but things are seriously falling down from a defensive point of view, and it's been just as damaging. Right from the opening bounce, the uncontested possession differential begins to blow out in the favour of the opposition. You could blame fitness if this were only happening late in games, but it's happening in the first 5 minutes. Then we tighten up in the third quarter and surprise, surprise, we claw our way back into the contest. But by the time the final term begins, Essendon's back on top in uncontested ball and the game slips away again. This stat is becoming directly linked to opposition scoring. It's our kryptonite. If this isn't by design, then what can be done to stop it? Clintosaurus says, the third quarter showed that the talent is there, so the issue seems to be application. So why can't we string 4 quarters together? And DFuture15 says, from the outside looking in, the problem seems to be the inability to carry out the desired game plan. This has led to a crisis of confidence and a veil of negativity. Why not play hard and contested and go down fighting? This would galvanise the players and the supporters. I would definitely turn up to see that. A bit, man, there's a few questions. A few of these questions point to something deeper than just a structural or personnel issue. It feels like there's a bit of a fundamental breakdown happening, whether it's defensive pressure mindset or even if it's just a basic ability to be able to execute, consistently. And we've spoken a lot about the game plan and the breakdown of it. And last week, we touched on that idea that maybe they're stuck in between 2 game styles. In the third quarter, we suddenly played a way that we hadn't played sort of all season, and it worked, but it didn't last, as we said. And I guess, the question is, are the players no longer able, or I don't know if we can discuss whether the players are no longer able or willing to execute the game plan, because we don't know that. And if it's the case, there's a disconnect, and we need to find out what can we do to turn around, or what can the team do to turn it around. I mean, there's no point pointing fingers, whether it's the coach or the game plan or whatever. But what do you think? Well, how do you think we can turn this around, short of sacking everyone?
I mean, it goes back to what I was saying about the communication. What are we trying to achieve? What is the, are we all chips in on a new method? In which case, give us some sense of what that looks like, and then everyone has to buy in it from the, as the cliche goes, as the boot starter all the way up to the interim CEO. Buy in, this is the way we're going to play, which is the weird thing about the Brad Green. He sort of touches on it, but with the, the players have to buy in. Of course, that's the sort of gift of coaching, isn't it? Is to get buy-in into a new method. And again, I hate to say it, because they drive me insane how successful they are. The Cats, Scott has done a brilliant job at tweaking game plan twice now. They went from that controller board method in 21 that that had got them a flag, completely threw that out and brought in our method, basically copied the Richmond Melbourne method that got them a flag, and now they're one of the best transition teams in footy. That's what love him or hate him, that's what Scott's obviously good at, being able to instill a message and change a methodology. And that's Goodwin's challenge this year, and it's just simply not possible if all your players aren't buying in. So, it's exactly as David said from Adelaide, and who's from Sunshine Coast? It was
Adam from
the Sunshine Coast sort of intimated as well, is we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. What we do know is what we see, and what we see is players not working, hard enough, and that's what that question, the part of that question about why didn't we, why are we allowing those sort of uncontested possession chains begin to blow out, so early, is that's George's point at the top, is how much is that coaching, them not coming in with a plan? How much is that the players not working? That requires effort to work across. And I think George's point's the important one, is that guarding grass concept. It's like you see it in basketball when teams are not, getting sort of cut up on defense. Everyone looks like they're doing the right thing. Everyone's quick to say, I'm doing my part of the business, but it's when the rubber hits the road is busting a gut to get across to a player that doesn't even get used because you bust a gut. And that's again on the players, isn't it? There's, it's a hard one. How can we, I would like some clarity of what we're trying to achieve, and say we're in for some pain. We're in pain already, but this is what we're trying to achieve, and we're going to go for it like we did in the third quarter. We're going to play that way for an entire match, and if we end up running out of gas and getting opened up, well, I'd rather that than what we're dishing up at the moment, which is like a stool with three legs. But just that comment from D Future, from the outside looking in, the problem seems to be the inability to carry out the game desired plan. I agree with that. That's one of the issues. Why not play hard and contested and go down fighting? Again, I don't think that's independent of the game style. No club is going to win games of footy in the AFL if they do not play hard and contest it. It's such a clear correlation between winning the pressure count is off the charts. It's the most reliable stat in footy. As I said, the only club in the last few years to have any success whatsoever that routinely lost that differential was the Pies in 23. Outside of that, it's almost, it's way up there in terms of 80-90% of teams of games are won by the team that win contested possessions and the pressure count.
All right, let's move on. Roosted Far says, why do our forwards always lead back to the square instead of at the ball carrier? Why is JVR doing it all alone up forward and backing it up in the ruck in a game we really had to win? Why can't we fire a shot in the last quarter? Red and Blue Rising says, why haven't we got a part-time forward coach mentoring JVR? Someone like Jonathan Brown or Jack Rewalt. Invest in the kid if he's going to be our focal point. So, George, what are your thoughts on our forward structure, how we're developing our young talent, particularly JVR? We've just talked about him. It really feels like we're mishandling the kid. It seems like he's getting no meaningful guidance off the field and next to no support on it. Every expert seems to agree that asking him to ruck's hurting his growth as a forward. As I said, I think we're seriously at risk of driving him back to WA simply because we're failing to nurture and develop him. But I think that question of why are we leading to the square instead of at the ball carrier is a pertinent question.
Yeah, I think we've talked enough about JVR, so I won't rehash that. But yeah, that is the real danger, that the kid will decide to get up and go to a place that will look after his development and his growth within the game, because he seriously is talented. But why he's not performing, I suspect, is because he's being asked to do far, far too much for someone who's 21 years old. I don't know why why nobody wants to lead. When you can certainly imagine at certain stages in the game when you've got 14 or 15 opposition players parked in front of you, you don't have the opportunity. But there were too many cases in this game where we did get the ball inside the 50.
Like our centre clearances. 12 times we got it out of the centre.
Yeah, and there was space there to be able to lead into, but it wasn't just JVR who, as Fritsch was doing the same thing, looking for the cheapie out the back again.
Well, ironically, when they moved him forward, George, at least he led up the guts at one stage and he got a beautiful kick went back and kicked it. But it was so rare, that bit of play.
Yeah, exactly. But you've got Melcham doing the same sort of thing. Spargo's doing the same sort of thing. There was space there, and they just weren't using it. So as outside observers, we go, well, who's teaching this? And it's pretty obvious that either the message isn't getting through to the forwards, but just as equally, it's you would think just on the numbers, the ball seems to be going in there enough, but we're not doing enough with it. But again, I don't think
we're not hurting them when it hits the deck. That's where Henderson had a dark day. I
was just going to say the same thing. In 21 and even the years after that, when it went into the forward line, it stayed in there. It just bounces straight back out again. There isn't the pressure, there isn't the effort, and we've got a couple of serial offenders in that aspect. I'm getting rather sick and tired of Fritchie walking around the ground. And honestly, that's all he was doing, walking around the ground when he isn't getting the ball put in front of him. You've got to do a lot more than that. And he's a player who needs to really lift his work rate and his efforts. That's how you get the results, compared to what Fritsch was doing, say, in 2021, where he was chasing, he was opening up the opportunities for people, but he's just not doing the work these days. And Melcham is so far past it
Except
I don't
he
know why.
can kick, like some of his kicking, and set up one of our goals. I think one of our 50% of our goals were set up by Melbourne in the first half.
Yeah.
Maybe it was in the second half he did that.
But it's just cameo.
Yeah,
You want effort for the whole game, not it was a brilliant mark. He took it on the wing that got the ball into the
that was
forward.
2 against 1, and he was 2 against 1. We were kicking to win the whole match, and he was, of course, getting outmarked.
Yep.
So,
but it's just cameo efforts. You've got to hard work gets you a long way, and our forwards aren't doing the hard work.
It was interesting that they. I'm pretty sure Viney played forward for at least part of the. I wish they'd tell on the coverage who's playing where at any given time. It's just a joke, but he looked like he was starting in that last quarter in the forward line, and that's where
I think it was earlier than that even.
Was it?
He was up there. I think it was just part of the interchanges that they do these days. But I think it also showed, and again, it's difficult on the television why you don't play him in the forward line. He cannot chase.
Yeah, but it's still like pressure
but
if he can't play him in the forward line, he can't play midfield then.
Well,
really,
right.
by the same logic.
We're getting
guys,
to the stage.
Can I just interrupt because I didn't include this question in, so I'll give him his due. Hatchman said, we need to talk about Viney. I'm only going by what I watch, but he just murders the ball every time he gets his hands on it. I love his heart, his strength, his guts, but he's becoming a liability. Should he sit in the forward line to help lock the ball in and increase forward line pressure, something we are embarrassingly bereft of right now. So continue. I just want to,
didn't have the time. Spot on. I mean, Adam the God's been calling for that on Demonland for a while, and I agree with it. And again, I keep harking back to the Port Hawthorn game, and it was Port play a brand of footy that really is interesting in the sense that it combines high pressure and contest that we've been trying to do with a super, super high press. And that's what's really hurt them over the years is defensively they get opened up. But when they're on and they're high pressing, they play like we did in 21, which was really get it in there, trap it in there, win it through contest. And half of their goals were for when the ball hit the deck inside the forward line and players like Pau Pepper and Rosie and the Richards, I think it was, a young player, like even young players were manic pressure inside their 50 and winning the spillages and snapping goals. And that's something we're really lacking. And I'd put Viney up there for that reason. Have Cozzy, really sort of get about it. Henderson's got to be showing more than he has in that regard. We've got to get back to that sort of intensity inside 50.
All right. El Diablo 14 asks, do you think Melbourne's list manager Tim Lamb needs to go? He wasn't able to bring any quality recruits after 2021. Truly a waste of our premiership window. Nita Fart says, like that name, would like a discussion about list management. I look at the KC/MFC list of players and I'm placing my hopes on players like Fullerton. By the way, I believe he should be given a chance given our forward line issues, but I don't believe we have the players underneath to make a real impact. Has the club faltered with its draft strategy of giving away mid-draft picks, focusing on high-end draft picks only? I believe the high-end picks will be good players, but our depth is poor, and who do we bring in as a glimmer of hope? So, big man, since our premiership in 2021, this is the list of players that we've brought into the club. Luke Dunstan, who's now retired. Brody Grundy's been traded to Sydney. Tom Fullerton can't get a game, even after kicking 5 goals. Shane McAdam can't get fit, and I don't believe he'll ever be able to get his body right. Jack Billings can't get a regular game. Tom Campbell, he's a bit injury-prone, but didn't seem to be getting a game before that. Harry Sharp's getting a game. Jack Henderson, Aidan Johnson. Not exactly household names and not really tearing it up in a team that's 0-5. In that time, Nathan Jones was retired. Aaron Vandenberg retired. Neville Jetta retired. Jaden Hunt traded to the Eagles. Toby Bedford traded to GWS. Luke Jackson wanted to go and traded him to Fremantle. Sam Wiedemann traded to Essendon. Magic Door retired. Mitch Bowen retired. James Jordan traded to Sydney, Harms to the Bulldogs, Grundy to Sydney, and Hibbert's retired, and Nibbler, our mate Nibbler, has gone to Adelaide. Are our list management decisions to blame for our current state?
Look, without wanting to prosecute that again, I think that stuff's overplayed, to be honest. No clubs really bring in that many influential players. The days of real star trades are over. I think Hawthorn have done well bringing Barras in, for instance. There's, we've done it as well. I've pointed that out before. Bringing Lever in May, and
Brown, I guess,
we're planning for the future. The one, in bringing the Windsors in, bringing Colt in, bringing McVie in. He was a rookie, but a high draft pick in Lindsay and Langford.
Those are all drafts, not trades.
They're drafts. So, I'm not talking about drafts.
But what I mean is that's where we've put our energy. But not that many clubs have brought in trades that have. I just think it's overstated. So you can pick any club and go, oh yeah, they brought in 2 or 3 players. But the reality is most clubs' success is built through the draft. Geelong are an outlier, but they brought in Cameron and Stengel was a really good pickup. But we've had our successes too. And as I said, Langdon's probably one of the best recruits from another club in the history of the Melbourne Footy Club, I reckon, or certainly in my time of barracking for the D's. So it's not like we haven't done it. It's just that the Geelong have just topped up. So what I would say, though, of those players is there was a mistake that's become evident, and it was a misreading of where the game's going, is that Bedford was the one for me. And I've been thinking about this is because, it was framed as much as anything, it was framed as a decision in the end between Chandler and Bedford. It was a complete false economy. To be honest, Harms, Jordan, Grundy and whatever. By the way, we tried with Grundy. We tried something pretty radical with Grundy, didn't we? And everyone bagged the hell out of it, said it was a stupid move, but we tried something. But for me, Hunt, all of those players you mentioned, basically, with one exception, are all, not going to help us. None of them are quick. None of them are good by foot, particularly. Jordan's meat and potatoes player. We're not missing him. We're not missing Harms. We are missing Bedford. And it was a stupid thinking in terms of, for me, putting it, in the end, it felt like it was a decision between Chandler and Bedford, and we couldn't, match. But we should have been all in on having both of those players because it was evident then that's where the game was going, needing outside pace and run and with good tanks. Those high half forwards that I've been banging on about for 4 or 5 years, the ones that Nibbler personified, the best in the business. Every club needs 3, 4, 5 of them now. Like, we should have seen the writing on the wall and said, no way are we going to trade out a player who has got leg speed and a massive elite tank who can play arc to arc. We'll pay him whatever he needs to be paid to keep him. That was, for me, the big glaring mistake. The others, I think, are neither here nor there. And but the other thing is that, as you pointed out, Andy, last year, is that we have struggled to attract players. That has to be in the mix. So, of course, you could say Tim Lamb, but if we all of the off-field stuff, you argued that what's his name, Houston, that one of the reasons he didn't come to the club was for all of our off-field drama. We struggle to attract, if a basket case off the field, you struggle to attract high-quality recruits from other clubs. So that's got to be factored into any assessment.
That was main this year, but like in 22, 23. We weren't able, and that could be a salary cap thing as well. We might not be able to.
We did try Grundy, didn't we?
Well, we did. We got Grundy, but Collingwood
was
because Collingwood couldn't keep him, and we just happened to be in the right place.
We had high hopes for Hunter, and the 3 of us thought that
right.
initially
that
was a good recruit.
He
played in a losing premiership side, obviously, and it was exactly what we needed: high skills. So it's not as if we haven't made efforts to bring in players.
It's just been unsuccessful.
Yes.
Just been unsuccessful. But how much of that's Tim Lamb or how much is that external stuff?
He's the one who's been doing it for the last 4 years. All the Mays and the Levers and the Langdons were all done before his time.
Yeah.
And the other thing was all the Mays and Levers were all 23, 24, 25. We've been recruiting 28, 29-year-olds like McAdam and Billings. There's no future in those sort of players.
Well, maybe but to be fair to Tim Lamb, pretty hard to recruit top shelf player when you've got your most talented footballer, leaking, or however that comes out. How much chaos there is at the club, it's pretty hard, isn't it?
There is absolutely no chance we're bringing anyone of note unless they're of note in the waffle or something like that. And maybe not even there.
Because we're not now going, well, what do you want me to do?
I wouldn't even waste whatever minutes he's got. Do people have minutes on their mobile phone anymore? Calling people, because no one's coming. I'll give you that now. No one is coming unless we're throwing a lifeline to some VFL player. No offense to anyone playing.
Well, and that's another point. That's a point George has made well over the years as well, is that, every year there's dreaming about these sort of players who are going to make a big difference, and how many actually do. You've got to spend big coin, and even with Houston, he hasn't done much yet for Pies. He played well in that first match, but he's not set their house on fire. It just doesn't happen that often that a player, it happens sometimes, but and as I said, we went to the table with Grundy and that didn't work, and we got smashed for that decision. Yeah. Smashed by the media, smashed on Demonland, smashed by Melbourne fans.
I think the only way we're going to be able to sort of maybe attract other players is with a regime change, and someone who comes in with all their own new people.
Exactly.
The current stock,
how does Tim Lamb go getting someone like Stengel? You don't even look at someone like Stengel with the baggage that he had. He goes to Geelong because Geelong can offer him stability and a way of hiding his indiscretions should he carry on off field, because
they're very good at that.
Leak.
They're very good at that. All right, let's talk about some leadership. Nairobi Demon asks, can you discuss the process and status of the CEO search? I'm increasingly worried that the lack of permanent president and CEO is showing in the players' body language. Dina Kilt says, for anyone who has been in a leadership position, the adage certainly rings true. Success has many fathers, while failure is an orphan. My experience is when things get exceptionally tough, 90% of people go running the other way or immediately go to the blame game. It's when you find out the true character of people. I think most people would be shocked about how this 90% can often include directors of boards. I'm making no representations of the MFC board as I have no knowledge. My point is, I really feel for Goody. We owe him so much for 2021 and the years of great success. This is where the CEO and Stephen Smith situation is not helping. Would you like to see Brad Green, the board, and Alan Richardson take some heat and be by his side? Be by Goody's side, assuming he means. We did get an email today from interim president Brad Green today, and it reads, "Dear members, I'm writing to acknowledge what has been a disappointing start to the season. Sitting at 0-5 isn't the standard we expect of ourselves, and we know it's frustrating for our members, supporters, and everyone inside the club. What I can assure you is that we have a determined group of players and coaches who will drive the team's response. We saw during the third quarter of Saturday night's match the style of game we want to play. If we can focus on delivering that style of play more consistently and effectively, keep training hard and sharpening our game, we'll see better results. That's the only way forward, and we must stay focused on improving. We also know there's been a lot of external commentary about our performances. That is to be expected when we are not playing well. Our values, trust, respect, unity and excellence have guided us through difficult periods before, and we'll rely on them again to return us to a club where you feel proud to belong. I want to thank our members for the role you play in helping the club through difficult times. We appreciate your passion and loyalty, and the support you provide our players and coaches is essential. Our next game is against Fremantle at the MCG on Saturday at 1:20 p.m. It's a new opportunity to show what we're made of. The players and coaches are determined to lift and give our fans a performance we can all be proud of. Off the field, our search for a new CEO is nearing its conclusion. We're looking for someone who truly fits our long-term vision, and we look forward to sharing more news with you shortly. Thanks for staying with us. I look forward to seeing you at the MCG as we push for a better result. Go D's." So, George, how do you assess the club's leadership and governance in this most difficult of times?
I utterly agree with Dean and Kilt about 90% of people running the other way, and that includes people on boards. I've been on a number of major boards and still on boards, and it is exactly that. People have great difficulty in making decisions, and there's a lot of people on boards who really shouldn't be there. And I know when I was doing the company directors course, they said you're lucky if you get 2 to 3 active members on any board. Most of the people are there for other reasons, or as they call it, doing the noddies, just, nodding the head in agreement with whatever's been put in front of them. But that's another story. Firstly, the green letter is just box ticking from what I've seen. What my impression was, how about just being honest about the performance? Come out and tell us that what we're seeing is just not good enough. It's not good enough for us as a club. It's not good enough from the players. It's not good enough from the coaches. And then we want you, the fans, to support us because we're going to do something about it. The other thing, going back to
George, can I stop you? Can I stop you there? Didn't we have a president that once did that after a game, and it might have ended in him leaving the club in circumstances?
Yeah, honesty goes a long way, unfortunately, with these things. The other thing, going back to Bin Man's point, is about communication. For crying out loud, putting out a letter, that's what a club did 50 years ago. How about you stand in front of a camera so that you can appeal, essentially face to face with the members and the fans. You can put it on social media where people get their information from these days, but a letter to the members that goes out in an email, I will guarantee you that half of them haven't seen it.
I haven't got it yet.
Well, yeah,
keep on stuffing up my membership. And by the way, membership department, you haven't been listening to. I still haven't got my card that I asked for.
Yeah, but this was something.
Think of the environment, man.
This was just so old school, and like I said before, do you honestly think that letter is going to encourage one extra person to come through the gate on the weekend? Absolutely not. It does nothing. It says, you, the fans, are responsible for this. What are you going to do about it as a board? What are you going to do about it as a coach? Tell us the direction you're going in, and then people will get on board. But that does nothing for us. As far as the CEO's position, I have great difficulty trying to understand how this has taken so long. Pert didn't walk out on the 29th of October. The board should have known about what was happening long before that, and we should have been making plans about replacement CEOs. There's not many other jobs that the board actually has to do apart from selecting a CEO. Not many others. You monitor and you evaluate and you set strategic direction. But this shouldn't have taken this long. There's a whole stack of reasons that aren't very good as to why it's taken so long. But we're on the outside. We don't know this. So I can't help out with anything in those matters. But yeah, how about some honesty and some truth and some up-to-date communications from the club? It'd be really appreciated.
Here, George.
Before you go on, B Man, a couple of things, George. We've heard the line about the search. We'll be sharing some info. We look forward to sharing some news with you shortly. I'm still waiting on news of a home base that every time we hear exciting news is just around the corner. And the other thing is someone did put through that letter, someone on Demonland put through that letter into one of those AI checkers. And it's he said, this guy, Red Jacket, said, we should get AI to run our club, because the AI checker found that 91% of the text is likely to have been written by AI, and 17 out of the 18 sentences are likely to be AI generated. So the only sentence I can see that looks like it wasn't AI generated was the go D's at the end. So anyway, P-Man, take it away.
I totally agree with what you're saying, George, about that. For one, I haven't got the email. So I have to see Demonland for know that Brad Green has put that out. I don't go to the website because the website's hopeless. And so what sort of communication? Admittedly, I'm not on any social media, but you're totally right. Why a message? So why a message from the president at this point in time? What's it, so it's normally a flag for a crisis. It's what you said last week is that, beware the president coming out and saying, the coach has the full backing of the board. That stops one step short of it, but it's also, it's full of half thing. I just, for the first time, saw, what is it? Our values: trust, respect, unity, and excellence. And I thought, I was going to make a gag out of what that, the acronym, TRUE, is the acronym. And I couldn't make a gag out of it because it felt like that some sort of consultant comes in and say, let's 100%. See what words we can make out of TRUE. We start with 100%. The word TRUE and work back from it. I didn't even know that they were our values. Okay, well, let's say trust, respect, unity, and excellence. Well, respect as a fan, as a member, as someone, as Lazy said, it's bloody expensive to buy a membership these days. You added a seat on, you're looking at $500, $600, $700 for a seat. Just for a standard membership is $258, and I still haven't got my bloody card for my $258. Well, show us some respect. If you're going to have a review and be transparent, where is the proper report from that review? What did we get from the review? Where's Shand and what's the other fella who's supposed to be, all of the talk about leading teams, and where's the 180-degree sort of reporting back? Where's the respect to fans to say this is what our review found and this is what we're doing? Other than, I know that there was another letter from Brad Green, but really it was full of sort of corporate speak. It didn't actually say what the review found. And I heard someone in that 40 minutes in the post game, and I was watching, is that there needs to be a full review at the club. And I was thinking, didn't we just do a full review? We've had so many reviews, it's like TripAdvisor. So I totally agree with what you were saying, George. And it's like, what's so a bit, I don't really get it. It's a sort of half-hearted, I look forward to seeing you at the MCG as we push for a better result. Well, if you're going to write a letter to say we leave nothing out there on the field and give everything to the red and the blue like we know you fans do week in, week out. That's what I want to hear from him. And like you said, a video him saying it, not some sort of AI-generated spiel that goes out on email.
Well, there was no Casey game this week, so there's no player performance this week that can be ignored. So let's go into the changes and see. Last week, Judd McVie was listed as only being a week away from returning. He would certainly be a welcome return to the side, but we don't know if he needs some match fitness. Colton Tolstrup was available to play last week, but given the case he didn't have a game, he might also need some match fitness, but his name will definitely be up for selection. Matt Jefferson was listed as a test last week as well, so he could be an option to come back in. Big man, followed by George. What changes, if any, do you have for this match?
Well, this is what I was trying to get at before, is that they've caught themselves now. So the president comes out and writes a letter to the fans, 5-zip. Presidents don't come out and write letters to fans when there's, unless there's a problem. So the club has acknowledged that there's a problem. So that result was unacceptable. It's triggered a letter from the interim president to say, sorry, basically, we'll, come to the footy and we'll do better. Well, for me, that goes to the question of selection then. So if that performance was unacceptable enough to trigger a letter to members from the president, so therefore the club, saying, yeah, we acknowledge that 0-5 is not good enough. Well, then what I expect to see, there's a what do you call it, an incoherence or a misalignment if that is then not backed up by some pretty harsh calls at selection. Like the two don't fit together. Do you know what I mean? If it's a bad enough situation for the president to come out and write an email to members to essentially apologise, well, then there's a problem. And in the way to respond to that is a club to identify people who aren't running hard, who contributed to 150 pressure points in that first quarter, who didn't cover grass. And so what I expect to say, I don't care whether we win or lose on the weekend. I want to see spirit. I want to see any single player who comes into that team playing with spirit. Therefore, I'd be dropping anyone who hasn't shown that minimum threshold of effort. And I'd be dropping Clayton Oliver. I'd be dropping Fritsch. So Fritsch played better this week. He was sort of, at least he kicked a couple of goals. I didn't know he just had a bub, so maybe that explains some of his performances in the last few weeks. It can be very stressful, as you guys it can be very stressful having children, so it's a tough time. And I'll maybe cut him a bit of slack, but I don't know about you guys. I wasn't super thrilled with his rock the baby goal celebration. Maybe that's being a bit harsh, but we've kicked 2 goals in a half of footy and our season's going down the toilet. It's not really time for giggles for me. So I'd be dropping, not on the back of that, just his intensity's not where it needs to be. I'd be dropping Fritsch. I'd be dropping Clary. I'd be dropping, I'd be dropping 2 or 3 players who, we know the numbers show aren't putting in the effort. I'd be selecting Fullerton. He should have been selected the week before. I'd be selecting Jefferson if he's the future, play him now. I'd be selecting, rewarding the 12 tackles that Kynan Brown laid and putting him in. And I'd be selecting Seston, and I'd be putting Colton Tholstrup back in the team. And if McVee's ready, I'd be putting him in the team as well. Whoever comes out, I don't know, Spargo can come out. I would be dropping Clary. I'd be dropping, I thought Sharp's effort was good, so he can stay on the side. I don't know about who comes out, but that's who I'd bring in.
I'd be dropping Melcham and Henderson in out of that forward line, particularly when you're bringing in those couple of smalls.
And Turner, Turner needs to come back in.
Turner needs to come back in.
And I'd be dropping JBR.
But I'd also be bringing in not only Turner but Fullerton and or Jeffo. If we haven't got any other rucks, so instead of dumping it on JVR all the time, let's see how we go with 3 genuine forwards up, in the forward line, not go small again. So McVee comes in. But there's too many of the ones who aren't putting in, and like you're absolutely right. This is the chance to, it's this. I hate to use the words, the line in the sand.
Yeah, it's a statement time.
If they're truly serious about wanting the fans to stay on board for what will be a long period, then you've got to start to show something from the other side as well.
Yeah, and they are going to come into the game. The Freo were the first team to work this out, and they said as much after they flogged us in the Alice last year, is that we knew that if we could get the ball to the outside, that we would have their measure. And that's what they will do again. And it's,
we'll get into the preview, and because I'm still somewhat triggered by that 92-point thumping that we received from the Dockers last year in Alice. And since that game, we've lost to them twice. Once in the return game in Perth last year by 50 points, and then just 6 weeks ago or so in a practice match by 19 points. The Dockers, they do have the wood on us in recent years. Since 2021, we've only beaten them once in 5 outings, not including the recent practice match. And this time they'll be without Demon Premiership player Luke Jackson. But Nat Fyfe is likely to return from a knee injury. Last week, Michael Walters was listed as being out for 2 weeks with a knee injury. So, of course, he's most likely to return this week. And that's my quota of MFC assess for the week, George, followed by, unless B-Man, you want to keep going, you'd started. Go,
George.
And watch, we're playing the Dockers on Saturday in front of a record amount of hungry seagulls. That's likely to be what will happen, George. Give you a preview and then B-Man, you jump in.
Yeah. We've got a horrible record against them, and they're a young team and they're up and running, and that's what absolutely rips us apart. Their midfield's top class, despite the fact that they live on the other side of the country where we don't get much vision of them or get to see them on as much as we do the Melbourne sides. They've got some really good, serious inside players. Without Jackson, that's a big advantage for us. But Darcy is basically a grunt type of ruck, and what I don't want to see is, for example, as we saw in the Essendon game where JVR a couple of times was thrown in against Draper, we don't want to see JVR being thrown in against Darcy because you'll get the same sort of treatment, and that's why you really need to bring in an extra. Let's see how Tom Fullerton goes against their backups. They haven't got much in the way of backups. They had Tracy did a bit of rucking this week. I can't remember the name of the other guy, but he was only about a 195. So someone like Fullerton should be able to handle him reasonably well as the backup ruck. It's going to be interesting, but it really is all going to depend on the selection, who comes in, who comes out. We've got to show a lot more in this game, and it's really is up to the players and the coaches to drill them for that. We can't afford to have the same grass tending, no tackling game that we've seen certainly in the last 2.
Yeah, and Freo will do exactly what they've done to us since that Alice game and all of the games since. And in fact, I think in the previous ones too, which is to get us on the outside and, rack up the uncontested marks. So to your point earlier, George, about, well, we knew that, that they were going to do that. Essendon were going to try and do that because the Cats did it so successfully. Well, what I want to see, you need players who have got the wherewithal to push hard to, to take that away from them, to gut run across to make sure that they can't just chip it around. So it'll be fascinating tactically whether we allow that again. I mean, if they do, and that's a low pressure first quarter, I'll seriously be tempted to leave the MCG and in protest at quarter time, because, the only way to do it is to do what Port did against the Hawks, take away their ball movement by frontal pressure, is rushing it, being manic at it. And if we aren't fit enough, which I don't think we are, and we can only sustain that for 2.5 quarters, I don't care. That's what I want to see. Yep. I don't want to, run the tank empty to halfway through the 3-quarter, then they smash us. Okay. But if we put up another quarter like that, then yeah, it'll be beyond disappointing. So, and so that means you need players who are going to take that direction and are going to leave nothing out on the field, like Chandler's, like Brown. I think he's that sort of player. Like Henderson, like Langdon. That's the sort of absolutely non-negotiable effort every player who wears a Melbourne jumper has to bring. And if they don't, I don't want them in the side.
Sorry, I was on mute. All right. Well, I think we're going to leave it there for tonight. We'll be back next week to break down that game against Fremantle. Hopefully.
27 degrees, high chance of showers.
Oh, fantastic.
Be good for our skills and the crowd.
Well, I still go back. Someone mentioned about the effort in that GWS game, and I still will say I think the weather had something to do with it.
It definitely didn't help.
Close. Well, didn't help them, I would say. But
no, it didn't help us, because when we stopped scoring once the rain came in that game. We were in the match until the rain came.
Yeah, well, I don't know what that says about GWS. If you want to listen to the show live as it happens.
Says they've got more skills than us.
Please head on over to demonland.com on Monday night at 8 p.m. Thank you to our 5-star reviewer on Apple Podcasts. Thank you to Balagan Party. Thank you to our voicemailers, Adam from Sunshine, from the Sunshine Coast, not from Sunshine. Totally different vibes of the two places, and to Demonologist, and also to Roaster, who only got one of your messages. I don't know where the other one went. Thank you to our callers, Sparganet and David from Adelaide. And as always, your questions and comments are an integral part of the show. So thank you to the Demonland posters who submitted their questions and comments. Thank you to Lazy, Supreme Demon, Doug Reamer, BW511, Wells11, Palace D's, Go Lordy, 48 Years Now, Nairobi Demon, Radish D, Dice, Bowser Power, Clintosaurus, D, Future 15, Roosted Far, Red and Blue Rising, El Diablo 14, Need a Fart, Dina Kilt, and Hatchman as well. And then there were a couple people who did submit comments and questions where we just couldn't fit them in, but we do really appreciate it. D's 1911 Rhino, Ross Milan, Buck Naked, and D Old Fart. I hope you enjoy listening to this podcast as you travel back from Adelaide. Thank you to my co-host, George and Minman, and thank you to you, our loyal listeners. Don't forget, leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we'll read it out and give you that shout out on the next show. Go Demons.
Red Leggers.